Welcome to the Brett Davis Podcast.
Well, here we go. The Coronado Film Festival is coming to I was going to say theater near you, actually to the island in Coronado very soon. And we talk about some of the great talent that's going to be involved this year. Well, we have two of those individuals that are very talented individuals that are going to be showcasing what they've done, some of their art and some of their work. I'm very honored, of course, to interview Aiden Keltner, of course, and John Rowe.
Yes, hi.
Nice to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
So, both of you, when I first saw you both, you looked like you were working on a project together. I don't know if you've thought about that, but it just kind of a synergy seemed like when I walked in.
We could.
Yeah,
Seems like a heck of a nice guy.
Yeah, same here.
So you've never met each other.
No, not
No.
till today.
How
Yeah.
fascinating. I mean, there seemed like already, it seemed like actually the three of us,
Yeah,
there's kind of a connection already.
maybe we should make a film. Yeah,
There
You
go.
you never know. Maybe something that's controversial and impactful, right?
Perfect.
So I'm going to start with John, because I want to hear about kind of how you got into film and how long you've been doing film, because you were a photographer before first.
You know, this goes back to a long time. It goes back to when I was a young man. I'd taken high school photography classes, but the Vietnam War was going on, and I was about ready to get drafted. So I joined the Navy Reserve. And they sent me, after taking tests and so forth, to the Navy School of Photography in Pensacola, Florida. And 18 years old, I went into a dark room for the first time, and I just completely lost myself in the world of photography and eventually film, because that was part of the program as well. And to make a long story short, we went on to make documentary films in the Navy. Most memorable one was in the Mediterranean, as we followed the activities of anti-submarine warfare, both on aircraft carriers and destroyers throughout the Med, filming in 16 millimeter film. And that's kind of how I got started. And I've loved photography and filmmaking ever since. And that was a while ago. That was in the early 70s.
Is there anybody in photography that you connect with in some way when you see their work? You're like, you totally get it.
Yeah, I've been really lucky. Over the years, I've gotten to know Steve McCurry very well. The Afghan Girl, maybe you remember the image from National Geographic.
Yeah.
He's become a dear friend of mine. Sebastião Salgado, also a very important photographer of our time, who's done a lot on both social issues. His earliest work was of the Ethiopian famine. There's a famous picture, a heartbreaking picture of a child who was hungry in Ethiopia and on the dirt crawling. And there's a buzzard behind that child following.
You know, I think I've seen it.
It's a famous image, right? That's Salgado. And I got to know both of those photographers very, very well, and others along the way that certainly have inspired me. But yeah, I'm a visual person, and my real background is in photography and that world.
Do you feel that social media and the internet has somehow improved photography, or has it watered it down?
Such a good question.
Yeah,
I'd love to know it. I didn't think, you know,
And you can also, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this first, but because I hear, I mean, sometimes more is not always better.
well, that's true. It certainly has changed. The value of photography has changed as well. You know, I think it's become so common, and everybody
Valuable
has
as well.
everybody has a phone, and everybody can take a picture. But that's good too, you know.
Yeah.
That's a very good
I
thing.
agree as well. And I would say also to the medium in general, filmmaking, that it has become much more accessible to anyone, which I think is a great thing.
Definitely,
You know,
definitely.
I think there are more people making films now than ever before in
Mhm.
history.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at just submissions to film festivals, the numbers are much more insane compared to what they used to be. So I think there are a lot more people creating films and images in general. And I think that will mean that there are more talented people But whether it's in the film medium, I think what is purchased by audiences and by the public shifts as well. So right now there might be less people creating independent films just because the demand is for Marvel films and things like that. But I think there will always be very talented people creating more work.
You know, I'm smiling because as you say that, I know of one film in particular, Searching for Sugar Man, one of my favorite documentaries, Academy Award winner. Some of the footage in that film, I understand, is from an iPhone.
Yeah.
So, you know, imagery that has ended up in some really fine films has come from all kinds of sources, including a cell phone. And that's pretty amazing that we live in a time when that's the case, when the phone you carry in your pocket is 4K video. Did I mention I started with 16 millimeter film?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've come a long ways.
Definitely. Yeah.
But there's something about the artistic part when you say 16 millimeter. It's a little grainy. It's kind of like comparing a record, a vinyl to a digital sound type of music.
Yeah.
Some people really love that scratching and that imperfection. Some people can't stand it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you can shoot in film, and there's some purists who, I'm going to shoot in film. I'm only going to, because you have a certain look and a certain texture and so forth. That's true. But if you shoot digitally, you can lay on any texture and any look you want. So at the end of the day, the digital solution is really a remarkable thing and lets you do pretty much anything you want to do that you can imagine creatively. And that's quite an amazing tool for a movie maker, a filmmaker, a storyteller. It's a great thing. It's actually a great time.
Yeah.
So John, how many films have you been involved with, and how many have you directed, produced?
So not that many, because along the way, I ended up taking a detour. I went from filmmaking. By the way, when I was in that Navy unit, some of the guys I was working with were from USC Film School.
Oh.
And they were working on a project with George Lucas at LAX called THX 1138.
Oh, yeah.
Robert Duvall's first film. They were in the bowels of LAX making this.
Was that like 1966?
No, this was 1971.
Okay.
That was being done.
Because I remember you said Robert Duvall?
Right.
I remember he was in True Grit.
Right. Later on, I think after that, because it was after THX 1138 that they went on to make American Graffiti and so forth.
One of my favorite movies.
Yeah, no doubt. But I ended up getting detoured into video games.
Interesting.
And which is, believe it or not, very similar. And I ended up
even more so now.
More so.
I mean, I think that the video games
Absolutely.
are probably better than a lot of the movies that are being put out nowadays.
Well, that was always the goal. We started out very early, very primitive, you know, with some of the 8-bit stuff from Nintendo and the earliest games. But now, you know, that dream of having a film character that looks like a film, but you can control the character, that's about where the games have come today. It's really quite extraordinary. Yeah. But I ended up producing video games, and along the way, I worked with Michael Jackson on a boxing game and got.
Did you meet Michael Jackson?
Directed him for a whole week right here in San Diego.
Wow,
it was amazing. I'll show you a picture. I've got a picture.
Yeah,
you don't believe me, I can tell.
That's incredible. Yeah,
but really did. It had some great experiences, but always had film and photography as something I wanted to do. Eventually I got to the point where I could pursue my photography. I've got a website, John Rowe Photo. You can go on and see some of my pictures from around the world. But I ended up in Africa and Ethiopia myself, in Southwest Ethiopia. And there was something going on that we thought was important to tell the world. So we made a film called Omo Child, O-M-O Child. It's on Amazon today. And it took us about 6 years to film.
Wow.
Going back and forth from here to Ethiopia.
6
for
years.
2 or 3 months at a time. I mentioned Steve McCurry, the photographer from Nat Geo. He was down there with us working on the project to tell that story. And that kind of got me back into it. And that was, it was out in 2017, I think. So we worked on that for a good 5.5, 6 years. And we've been working on our current project for now since 2017. So almost 6 years on that too. So I end up in these long documentaries that take many years to tell these stories because they're character driven, the story of people. And it takes time to see that story evolve. So
give us a premise about your current project that you've going to be turning in, or that you've turned into the Coronado Film Festival.
So the current project that we have is a short film, a short documentary we did on a painter, an artist from Southern California. His name's John Cosby. Interesting guy. He joined the Army. Everybody has a military story here today, but he joined the Army, took some tests, and they decided they'd send him to communication school. And from communication school, he was selected to go to the White House to work. And he went to a White House that was in turmoil because Richard Nixon was president and the Watergate crisis was going on. John, this young 18, 19-year-old communication specialist, worked there until Nixon resigned, and then Nixon flew to California to live in San Clemente. And John was on the airplane with President Nixon when that happened, and ended up living in San Clemente and working for Nixon for the next year, and eventually became a painter. And he's very well known. He's collected by many museums and large private collections. He's very close to Joan Irvine. And I'll give you one little tidbit. Have you ever been to In-N-Out and had a burger?
Did my wife talk to you about what we had for dinner last night?
Have you noticed the cups have palm trees all around?
Well, I noticed that, and I know there's secret biblical, not really secret anymore underneath.
Well, John didn't have anything to do with the biblical messages, but the design,
the palm tree,
logo,
palm
everything
tree.
to do
John?
with In-N-Out John.
Wow.
So that's part of
So
our
how
story.
long ago was that made?
The film?
The palm tree that he put on that.
Palm tree. You're going to have to watch. You're going to have to come to the screening.
Well, I plan on being there.
Which is on the 9th at 10 a.m. But I'm not going to tell everybody else the secret. You're going to have to come see it to get that.
You guys didn't share any of our film with him, or what's in our film, did you? No.
Your film being The Big Dump.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're going to let you. Hopefully, you can come and see the surprises, unless they told you everything, of course.
Well, I know we're talking about our project.
Yeah.
But The Big Dump is something that really did catch my eye, and I hope other people take a look at it, because that's going to be showing here at this festival as well.
I think with the decline in history, and a lot of students are losing interest in history, I'm hoping that the types of films that we're making will ignite something in them, that history somehow is, that they're just not going to anymore. I think they're more interested in the types of things that we're talking about, because it's quick, it's fast, and it's visual. And so let's hear about your film.
Yeah.
So I want to hear what you're doing, because right off the bat, we just I came in and we talked a little bit about what you've done. You've had a very interesting career. You started in film when you were 8 years old.
Yeah, I started picking up a camera and making movies when I was 8, just with my family, my brother, pulling him in to do small things. So yeah, I have some funny stories of when I was young getting the cops called on me because I had some fake guns that looked a little too real. So that was definitely interesting.
How old were you then?
I was, I think, 12 maybe.
God, imagine what happened to you now.
Yeah, I know, right? Really? Yeah, thankfully I don't make films with guns anymore. I think when you're young you get really excited about that stuff. But yeah, I started when I was pretty young, and I started working on kind of professional sets when I was 15. I was homeschooled through high school. So with that, I was able to because I wasn't going to school, I was able to go to sets instead.
You had flexibility.
Yeah, a lot of flexibility. When I was 17, I started going up to LA. I would take the train up there and I would stay in a hostel, and then I would volunteer.
At 15?
17 at this point. But I was still pretty young. I didn't have a car or a license. So I would take the train up, and then I would stay in a hostel, and I would carpool to different film school sets. So I would work at the American Film Institute, at USC, UCLA, and I would volunteer on those sets. And then sometimes I would get to sneak into some of the lectures. And I will not disclose this too loud, but I actually lied about my age, because to work at AFI, you're supposed to be 18 for insurance purposes. So I just had to kind of sketch or scribble the date that I was born on some forms. But anyway, I had a good time. Yeah.
I've heard that Mr. Spielberg used to do the same thing. He was known to go by with his briefcase and go into Universal, like he had, and he would stay on these sets for days.
Yeah.
It sounds very similar to his situation.
Yeah, I think the main difference was just that I was doing it at film schools. But yeah, I've heard that same thing, that he like snuck in. He went on a tour and then maybe hid in a bathroom and then got an office and met people through that. So he has an incredible story, definitely. But yeah, I had a good time doing that.
So what is your do you have a variety of taste of films that you like to do, or is there a certain genre that you kind of like lean towards?
Yeah, so I mostly make films kind of focused on mental illness and mental health. My
Interesting.
dad's a psychiatrist, and I have multiple family members with mood disorders and things like that. So because of that, I kind of have a story that I feel like is important to tell. So the film that I made for this festival, for Coronado Island Film Festival, was a story of a mother taking care of her son with schizophrenia. So it's a narrative film that I directed, and it was something I've worked on for a long time as well.
Why do you think it took so long?
I think everything always takes longer than you think it'll take. So that's one thing. Sometimes it's good for things to take a while. I mean, I finished the film about a year and a month ago. Yeah, I finished it right after my 20th birthday, which was, about a year and a month ago. I just turned 22 this past year. And so, yeah, it was right before I turned 21.
When's your birthday?
September 24th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Happy belated birthday.
Thank you. Yeah. So I finished the film then, but I've been financing it and working on it for a very long time. I think it was probably about probably 3 years now. And that's when I kind of first thought about the project, started writing a script, then ran a fundraising campaign and got it made. But I did a lot of research. I spoke to a few moms who have lived in this situation, and I lived with one mom in Petaluma, California, spent time with her. And I just really based the story on these experiences that I had and these stories that I heard. And I hope that the film can kind of do justice to the experience they've had, and share more of an experience that many people I don't think know about and have learned about.
So during the process of making the film, was there anything about schizophrenia that you found out that you weren't aware of?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, I think the main thing that I kind of learned about more through the process was how common the situation is. The film focuses on a mother who's in her 60s or 70s taking care of her son who's closer to 30 or 35. And then with that, the film focuses on the situation where a mother has to spend her entire life taking care of her son. And it's very common in our society. 1 in 100 people or more are diagnosed with schizophrenia. And with that, in that community, a lot of people end up on the street. Some people have very positive outcomes where they're able to live very healthy, full lives. And then some people are in very difficult situations where only 1 or 2 family members really want to take care of them. And that's the story that I kind of focused on with this film. And I think that it's kind of beautiful to focus on the story of a caregiver who will dedicate her life to someone who sometimes cares less about themselves than they do about anyone else. So I really found the idea of someone dedicating their life to someone that they love more than they love themselves really beautiful. And a lot of that kind of connected to my own mom and how much she kind of cared for me and my brother growing up. So, yeah.
So you said cared for. Do you suffer from some type of situation like that?
No, my family has, both my parents have mood disorders and depression, things like that. So both me and my brother, and they they deal with that stuff, and I have a lot of family members who take medication for mood disorders.
Okay.
So both me and my brother always had this question growing up of like, are we destined to have a similar experience? The main difference from this film to my family situation is that schizophrenia and psychosis spectrum disorders are very different from mood disorders. Psychosis is the experience of having an alteration to reality. So you hear something, you think something's there, you hear voices, things like that. Mood disorders are more just feeling very elated and positive, or feeling very low and depressed, and how that can affect your experience. So that was what my family deals with. And so growing up, I had lots of mood swings dealing with that genetic baggage. So my mom was really loving and caring. And I think that was a lot of the reason that I wanted to pursue this film, because these stories that I heard about a mom dedicating their life to their kid, I found really beautiful.
I find through the years of interviewing people that some of the most creative people throughout history had some type of disorder, like you're talking about, that made them great. And had they not had those disorders, they probably would have never had a Da Vinci. We would never had a what's the one that did Starry Night?
Van
Van
Gogh.
Gogh.
Van
Yeah.
Gogh.
Van Gogh.
He had, yeah, I mean, he definitely had bipolar disorder. He may have had schizophrenia as well.
He
People
may have
don't
had
know for
lead
sure.
poisoning too,
Yeah.
because he was chewing on his paintbrushes. Seriously, that was one of
I heard
the
that Poe was had lead poisoning,
possibly. Yeah.
and he died very young, other than alcohol. But I find a lot of these things, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? I mean, to be great, sometimes you have to be so different, and maybe the hell and the burden that one creative person carries is what makes them do the great work that they do. And both of you are very gifted. There's no question. I look forward to seeing both films. Is there anything out there for anybody that has these types of disorders, any type of message you'd like to share?
Well, I think in the research that I've done, my film is a painful, less hopeful film in some ways. I mean, it has a positive message at the end, but I wanted to do justice to some of the mothers whose stories that I've told. And I've gotten a chance to do some focus groups since then in Oakland, in Minnesota, and in New York. So that's been very positive. But what I would say is that there is hope for people who are dealing with schizophrenia. And one of the things I've done in research since then was learning more about Dr. Leighton and Team Daniel running for Recovery from Mental Illness, which is an organization that he runs. But basically, he is a huge advocate for clozapine, which has been a medication that saved his son's life. And when I first learned about his circumstance and the story that he tells, I was kind of amazed, because it was one of the first stories that I was felt like actually had hope. A lot of stories in this field are very painful and tragic. And in his story, I mean, he's a doctor who was a nephrologist, and then he went in, his son was diagnosed with schizophrenia, and so he started treating his son. And so he has been a huge advocate for clozapine, and he has a lot of his patients who are doing amazing even with the disorder, despite of the disorder. So what I would say is that there is hope. Do research online, talk to advocacy groups, and know that you are not alone, because a lot of families feel very alone, and it can get really heavy and very burdensome and very painful. But when you know that you're not alone, and when you know things can get better, there's reason to wake up in the morning and get up, and that's all we need in life. So,
Why do you think, and this is a question for both of you, John, you have a lot of experience in life and you've traveled the world. You've also you're very much an old soul as well. Why are we seeing such an increase with mental health issues other than, of course, the pandemic? Why has there been so much more of it?
Social media.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think that
Because
causes
you said
a lot of
inherent.
anxiety.
One thing you said was, and I don't mean to cut you
Yeah.
off, you had said, and the family had some of this.
Baggage and
So
genetic
where is this coming to where the families are getting it? And the question, why are we seeing such an increase in it?
I'm not sure. I
I
know
mean,
that
we have so much technology
yeah.
and knowledge in this country. I don't understand why, and a lot of people are embarrassed to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, that's the hope as well. Because I mean, a lot of people, thankfully, NAMI and other organizations are doing great work to spread conversations about mental health. So depression and anxiety are something that a lot more people talk about. And it's something that I think is much more socially acceptable to talk about. But
So it's always been there?
well, it's always been there. And I guess what I would say, I think that it has been there for a while. What I am not entirely sure myself, because I know the data suggests that a lot of the time people with these disorders, the numbers are going up. And there's not a specific correlation that I've researched or found that would lead to why those things are happening. But I think part of the focus that the groups and organizations that I've talked to are kind of focused on as well is spreading more conversation about issues around serious mental illness, which is the conditions, which are conditions like schizophrenia, other psychosis spectrum disorders, and kind of more severe bipolar disorder. Because that's something not a lot of people talk about that I think needs to be more talked about and more socially acceptable.
I think this is my take, and John, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Sure.
I think a lot of it has to do with the chemicals in the food that we eat and the water that we drink and the air quality that we have, and maybe even the cell phone towers. I know it all sounds like science fiction. And then I also think maybe even some people's bodies have a response to certain vaccines.
Yeah, I don't know the data on that at all, but I think that could be true. I'm very open to any possibility.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I absolutely don't know. It's an interesting subject though, and your film sounds fascinating, it really does. And it takes a little bit of courage to take on something like that. It's not an easy love story, you
Yeah,
know?
for sure. Definitely.
Well, love's never easy.
Love is never easy. Yeah.
Did you find this, and this is a question for both of you. Did you find your films to be therapeutic and in some way by doing them?
Do you want to go first?
You know, ours is a film. Let me start by saying that we've done some heavy stuff. We've been to some places in the world. We've filmed and so forth that are really tragic places.
Vietnam being one of them.
Vietnam being one, but although I didn't film there, but Africa specifically, I saw some things there that are really hard to watch, involving children and
Terrible.
Bad water and bad health and not having access to medicines and simple things. Anytime people suffer, it's a bad thing, whatever that might be. So for us, our film is not a heavy film. We're not giving a message. It's just the opposite. It's a story about a person whose life has been in the arts, a visual person who goes to beautiful environments, beautiful natural environments. I'm talking about somebody who paints landscapes and paints beautiful scenes at the ocean or in the mountains. It's a little different approach. We filmed in Maine, and we'd never been to Maine and New England before.
You never had been?
I had never been there. And
you've been all across the world and you've never been to New England and Maine.
I've been to probably more places in Africa than I have in the United States. But yeah, we did. We kind of dwelled in that happy place, in an enjoyable place.
Was it fall? Some fall leaves and the browns and the...
I'm trying to remember if we had much color. We didn't have a lot of color, but I remember we had a lot of rain. We had other things going on. But what I really remember is the seafood and the oysters.
They're known for that.
Oh my goodness!
So what? After filming this film, what is it about the artist that you found out that maybe you weren't aware or were surprised about, that you're like, wow, this isn't? Because to me, it sounds inspiring for maybe even people that maybe are on the cusp of being that artist, that maybe want to be free and create, but maybe they're afraid to.
Well, John is an interesting person because he's a people person, and he's a wonderful artist. And to see the interaction between people who are walking down the road and see him, and he talks with them, that whole exchange is really an example of his life. And he has a wonderful spirit, and he has charisma, and he brings that with him wherever he goes, and it's an uplifting spirit. And there are people in the world that do that for us, that are positive energy folks. It's not all depressing. We're not all starving. It's not all negative in the world. And some of our films have to show the good stuff and the pretty stuff.
Totally.
And hopefully ours brings a little bit of joy, a little bit of happiness, and a little bit of beauty to the world, because we need more.
That's all we can do, I think.
Really, really.
I think we do need more right now than ever. And I think, like the weather in itself, darkness, there's always light somewhere coming back full circle. And it sounds like you both have done this with some topics. Yours was a little bit lighter, but inspirational.
Very definitely.
And it's something that maybe even young kids would like to see, to be able to, I mean, like there may be artists that don't really know that they can make a living at this.
It's our film, John Cosby, the artist, is an inspiration on different levels. He talks about how he all started and how he was inspired. And it was his grandmother who inspired him.
It's always a grandmother, isn't it?
And sometimes it is. And it wasn't just that it was his grandmother. It was, and he describes this in our film, how she talked to him, how she treated him, the respect that she showed him as a young person, never speaking down to him. And she was an artist, and she didn't try and teach him, but he would observe and he would want to do something along with his grandmother. And that was the start of the whole thing for John. So there's always somebody out there that I think inspires us or leads us to other things. Maybe it was your parents.
Maybe your father.
Yeah, I think that my father's situation, and I think my initial actual exposure to this circumstance and to this story was my father had to take a call while I was in the car with him. And back to the heaviness of my story, a mom was calling my father because she wasn't sure what to do about her son because she was afraid about her safety and the safety of some other people. And so my dad had to tell this mom to call the police on her son. And so I found that very heavy at the time that I heard it. And that was probably 4 years ago, at least now, maybe a little longer. But anyway, that was definitely one of the things that inspired me for this story. And I think that for me, it's always been just different mentors I've had in life. I think one thing I try and do as I get older is help out the people who are kind of coming up and learning from me any opportunity I can get. Because I know for me, it was always the people who were kind enough to show interest in this 15-year-old kid who was walking up to them and talking like this. Who they would say, yeah, you can come to set with me. I'll let you can volunteer. You can help out. Just show up at this time. Yeah, your mom can drop you off over there. She can pick you up over there. So it was always the kindest people who were willing to just show a little kindness in the world that I really appreciated and helped me.
I think your film's going to be used as a tool for people that maybe feel they're alone, but they're not. Maybe give them some hope, because hope is something we need right now.
Totally.
And inspiration, John, on your part for what you're doing with your film for future people that maybe not aware that they can do these things.
Whatever, your creative passion is, pursue it. Everybody has something, whether you want to make a clay pot or you want to paint a picture or take a picture with your iPhone.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. But allow yourself the ability to pull out of your problems and smell the roses.
Definitely. Yeah.
And like you said,
picture.
Absolutely. And I think Apple still does their film festival, don't they? Where if you use their strictly just Apple phone, you can.
I'm not sure.
Did they pull that?
I don't know if they do or not.
They used to do it.
They used to.
Yeah. I don't know much about that.
I don't either.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting. We got a lot out of this conversation. It went way too quick. And I look forward to seeing both of your films.
Thank you.
I'm really appreciate both of you being here and sharing your stories as much as you could in a short time.
Sure.
And again, thank you. Good luck to both of you. I know you're going to make an impact in the festival.
Appreciate it.
I know Coronado's happy to have you involved. And Doug St. James and
We're
Merity.
happy to be here.
Yeah, definitely.
Doug St. James and Merity, book who are involved with the festival. It's not easy to get in this film festival, and you both did.
Thank you.
So congratulations.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. We're happy to be here.
Yeah,
okay,
for sure.
There you go, guys. Would support them if you're in town, even if you're not. If you happen to want to see some good films, the information is there at the very bottom of the screen. We appreciate them taking time out of their busy schedule to be here. And for everybody out there, remember, chase your dreams, and let's be kind to each other.